So back for part two of an hour with the tower with the legend that is Mr. Joe Beevers. We touched on you starting to travel around a little bit, Joe. Your next venture, which seems like an amazing place to play, and there has to be 100 stories. Amsterdam. Please tell me there's some stories we can't hear as well as some that we can.
You're just freezing up a little bit there, Phil. I hope you're all right, pal. I kind of got the gist of the question.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. You have to remember, in the mid to late 90s, there was like a tour.
Yeah.
It's not like it is now, where on any given day you could go to one of 20 different festivals and there's lots of clashes and lots of competition. It was the same places. So every Easter would be the Irish Open. Every November would be the Master Classics in Amsterdam. Every May to June, July would be the World Series, and every literally each month we would go somewhere else, and I would travel around with Barney, Ross, and Ram. And the biggest festival of all, out in Europe, the biggest festival outside of America, outside of the World Series, was the MCOP, the Master Classics of Poker in Amsterdam. And it started, I think, in the early 90s, and we went 10 years in a row, 12 years in a row to the Master Classics, the four of us.
Nice.
Amazing place to play. The first year I ever went was 97. Mm-hmm. And I was sharing a flat in Hendon with a couple of friends of mine from university. And I won my first major tournament at the Master Classics of Poker in 1997. And I can remember, I must have borrowed I don't know if I had a mobile phone there or not, but I remember making a phone call to my flatmate at 3 o'clock in the morning, singing "We Are the Champions" down the phone, and I was very drunk. I remember doing that. But it was, it was the festival that everybody went to. I mean, now there's so much competition. It's still a great festival, but I haven't been for a few years.
Yeah. Well, same as Las Vegas, you had 190 runners in that event. 190 in that event. 190 in this one. So you beat 10 more people.
Brilliant. I can't tell you if they were women or not, though. Oh, do you know what? Do you know the amazing thing? I beat a woman heads up.
You did.
I did.
And I've got that. I look at the stats. And it's not that I've remembered it all. I've got my stats in front of me. I'm doing my homework.
Brenda Nelson.
Correct. Brenda Nelson.
Beat her heads up. An American lady. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taller than me.
And talking about stories, you say you were travelling about, and obviously stories that we can hear. How did you get to meet Ram as well as Ross and Bob?
I met Ram. I was driving around North London. I was actually in Stanmore with a friend of mine, Jeff. Mm-hmm. And this is pre-mobile phones. So we're driving along and he says, "Oh, Joe, we've got to back a dog." So I said, "Is it going to win?" He said, "Yes, Joe, it's going to win." He said, "Listen," he said, there's an AR Dennis betting shop up here on the left. He said, "And there's a phone box outside, one of the old red big metal phone boxes."
Yeah.
Now, what I want you to do, he said, he pulls up next to the phone box, which is immediately outside the betting shop. He says, "I want you to go and stand in that phone box." I said, "Okay." He said, "Here's £100." He said, he said, "Just stand in the phone box." He said, "It will ring. When it rings, you'll be given the name of a dog to back at this meeting at this time." He said, "Take the £100, go in and take the price, and then collect the money afterwards, and I'll pick you up afterwards."
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay." So I stood in the phone box and the phone rings and I pick it up and he says, "12:45 Monmore, track 3, and puts the phone down. So I go in the shop and I look up and track 3, it's opened even money.
Yeah.
It's gone 10 to 11, 4 to 5, 8 to 11, 4 to 6, it's now 8 to 13.
The money's on it.
It's now 8 to 13. So now I don't know what to do. I've missed the even money, but I've gone straight into the shop. So I think, well, I've got to put the bet on, otherwise I'll have to pay it myself. So anyway, I've put the £100 on for Jeff, and I put something on for me as well. Mm-hmm. And I stood and watched the race, and it got beat. And I've walked out the shop, and Jeff's picked me up, and he said, "Got beat." I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Did you back it?" I said, "Yeah, I backed it." He said, "Well, okay, never mind." Anyway, so off we went. Anyway, the following week, I'm playing in a private game in Mill Hill. Like pre-internet, casinos closing at 4 o'clock. There were lots more private games going on. Yeah. So in this private game on a like full-size poker table with professional dealer and everything, I'm playing in this game, 7-card stud private game, and there's a ring at the doorbell. And someone goes to answer the door, and I can hear the voices in the hallway. And I think I recognise that voice. And in walks this person, and he goes, "Hello, everybody." And I looked at him and I said, "Trap 3, one more." And it was Ram Vaswani. He was the guy on the end of the phone. That's Ram and I became friends. We became friends in this game. We finished up running a game in Hendon. Like every Monday night. The game ran for 10 years. And Ross was a regular in the game. Ross would come all the time to the game. He came along one day with a friend, and Ross was a regular in the game. And then one day Ross bought Barney. And that's how the four of us collectively became the Hendon Mob, playing in that game in my flat in Hendon. We were four of the hardcore in the game, travelling around together. And that's how I met Ram Vaswani in a telephone box. He's still tipping losers today.
Oh, that is so old school. Absolutely. Do you actually consider yourself as old school?
Yes, I think I'm very old school. I mean, look at the grey hairs, right? I even got a matching.
They're all in as well.
I'll tell you how old school I am. Right? I mean, obviously, a lot of the stories will involve the boys, but I can remember going to the first ever poker tournament in Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo had never ever had a poker tournament before, and I think it was the Monte Carlo Millions, and we were staying at the Hotel de Paris. It's an amazing hotel, like on the main square. Very, very exclusive, very, very expensive. We were very lucky. We were all our expenses and everything were picked up, and we were playing in this tournament. Anyway, we've gone to check in this hotel, and I've got my laptop with me. I think we'd already set up the Hendon Mob website was already running. It was more like a blog at that point. The database hadn't even been thought of yet. And we had but there was a bit of online poker going on, and I had my laptop with me, and I went to the check-in, and I said, "Do you have internet here?" "Oh, I can't do a French accent," but she says, "Yes, Mr. Beevers, Monsieur Beevers, yes, we have internet." I said, "How do I connect?" She said, "Hang on a second." She said, I don't know if there's any left," she said. So she went off and she came back and she had a 56k modem in her hand. And I said to her, "The 56k modem, is that the best you got?" She said, yeah, this is good connection, she said. So she hands me the connection, and she says, "You need to plug this into your phone in your room for the dial-up." I said, "Okay." Now Ram is behind me at reception, checking in with somebody else, and he can overhear the conversation. And he says to the guy checking him in, he says, "I'd like the internet as well." And the guy says to him, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Vaswani, Monsieur Vaswani, I'm very sorry. We only have 2, and they're both out now. Mr. Beevers took the last one." So for the whole hotel, they've got 2 56k modems. Ram comes running after me. He says, "How much for the modem, Joe? How much for the modem?"
People don't realise these days. You just click buttons and just expect it to turn on. And back in the day, what would have happened if the modem had to work?
Probably one of the most exclusive hotels in the whole world. Definitely one of the most expensive. They had 2 56k modems for everybody, for the whole hotel. Yeah.
You obviously, when you go to Amsterdam and you go to places like Austria and Slovenia, did you see Devilfish? Was that the time where Devilfish was around?
Dave was a very, very good friend of mine. I first met Dave in Paris. I first met him in Paris. And my first experience of him was him asking me if he could borrow £1,000. That was my first experience. What happened? He didn't ask me directly. We were all playing in Paris, and he was friendly with Ross. And he said, it was one of those things where one of us always had some money and the rest of us was always skin. And we were in Paris playing lots of cash games. The cash games there were pretty good. And Ross came up to me and he said, listen, he said, Dave's asked me if he can borrow £1,000. I said, well, what are you going to lend it to? He said, no, Joe. He said, I haven't got it. He said, can he borrow it from you? I said, well, there's two rules. I said, first of all, you've got to guarantee it, Ross. And secondly, he's got to ask me himself. So that was my first experience. I lent it to him and I got it back. And Dave and I became very, very good friends. And it was very sad and he died 5 years ago now.
And absolutely.
April 5 years ago, I think it was. I went up to his funeral. It was pretty amazing. It was a pretty amazing funeral. Everybody was there.
A proper legend in the game, as well as yourself. You know, you've got the stories. That is just about it for part 2. We will be back very shortly with part 3.